And we are back. Welcome to Sharko's Tactical Podcast, episode 25. I am here with one of our past guests, attorney at law, Jeffrey Young. I'm also here with my homies, Omar, Luke Andrews.
What up?
And the amazing Dean Carroll.
What's going on?
How you guys doing?
Good.
Good. Solid day.
Solid day. Hey, Merry Christmas to you guys, or Happy Holidays, whatever you celebrate. And just a reminder, if you could smash the like button, give us a follow if you're watching this. If you happen to see one of our clips, go to our various social media pages and give a follow. We do this not for monetary benefit, but we do it to increase our internet footprint, if you will. So everybody makes a little bit more, does a little bit more, has a little bit more. Jeff, how are you?
Good. How's it going?
It's good. How's the legal business been?
Yeah, I mean, it's like every other business. It has its ups and downs, comes and goes. Everything seems to be going good.
Is it busier during the holidays?
No, actually, it dies down during the holidays because nobody wants to get divorced right before the holidays because that's just such a pain in the ass.
Okay.
And even if you get arrested like in early December, you usually don't get an arraignment date till like mid-January. So you're pushing all your criminal stuff off until after the holidays so you can deal with everything else. So usually like by mid-November until like the beginning of January, everything basically kind of comes to a halt. The judges all go on vacation. The prosecutors all go on vacation.
What do you do for a month and a half then?
Christmas shop, wrap my gifts.
Hang out?
Yeah.
Clean the
hang
pool.
out, get caught up on stuff that needs to get caught up on.
Do podcasts.
Go on vacation.
Do podcasts.
Do podcasts. Make my own videos on my channel. Whatever I can find.
So
walk the dogs.
You were one of the like most favorite popular guests that we've had. Like, and we've had a couple big people, but like you've got a lot of traction.
Cool. Yeah, I appreciate it. No, I would agree with that because right after I went on your show, even my own YouTube channel kind of took off because I guess a lot of people saw it there and probably went over there, and I probably gained like 4,000 or 5,000 subscribers in like the month after I was on your podcast.
Oh, killer.
So I give you a lot of credit for that. It was a really big deal. Yeah, my channel is now up to about 10,000 followers over on YouTube. I got a couple videos that are approaching like 500,000 views. So yeah, no, I appreciate it.
Did you get more clients? Did people that had?
I don't know. Probably
Can't really
not.
tell. Probably not.
Yeah, I can't really tell because a lot of they're not necessarily local. So most of the people, I would imagine, most of the 10,000 subscribers I picked up probably don't live in Sarasota. So it's probably they're not necessarily going to be clients. But
you're definitely
spread the word.
Are you still busy?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I just. People keep pulling guns on during road rage incidents. And I talked to a road rage guy yesterday, and so yeah, it's just kind of like I got a murder trial coming up. So like the second week of January, I have a drive-by shooting murder trial coming up. So that takes up a lot of your time when you're prepping for a case like that. So yeah.
Okay, great. The last time we had you on, I was like, man, shit, I want to get Jeff on again. Like you got a lot to talk about, but something in particular that we deal with a lot are conditional non-approvals. Mm-hmm. So in a situation, and I don't know, I kind of wanted to have you come on and you being a lawyer, tell us if it's a tactic that the state uses or the feds use in order to kind of implement kind of secret gun control. Because it seems if anybody has anything on their record, like if their record's not squeaky clean, if there is a pot charge or if there's some type of violence or anything, you get a delay on the approval process. And many people, like I had a kid come in, which spurned the call. I had a kid come in and he showed me his court docs.
Right.
And his court docs said case dismissed.
Sure.
And he's still delayed.
Right.
And it's delayed right now. So is it just incompetence of the court? Is it backdoor gun control? How do you, so a conditional back up, like if you've got something on your record, various stuff, a lot of times what will happen is you will get delayed, or the term for it is conditional non-approval. And back in the day, the FBI and FDLE had 3 days to approve it. And then after the Pulse shooting, they changed that, and it can be held indefinitely. Sometimes it's they find stuff and you get a non-approval, and most of the times they don't find anything and they let it go. But it seems that it's become hyperinflated, like how difficult it is and how much of a problem it becomes. And it seems like it's backdoor gun control.
Well, so here's what's happened with that. As you said, when you fill out a background check, there's three things that could happen to you. You can get approved and you walk out with your gun. You can get denied and then you go through the appeal process, or you get the third, which is a conditional denial. What that means is there's something in your background check that they don't have an answer to, and so they can't approve you or deny you, so they put you in this third limbo category of conditional non. What used to happen is, right, before the law changed, if the 3 days went by, it wasn't necessarily that they had 3 days to approve you, but after that third day, the store could decide whether to release the firearm to the person. They didn't have to keep it forever. Right. Hey, look, it's been 3 days. You didn't give me a denial, so I'm going to give my gun to the person. Some stores wouldn't. Some would be like, look, I'm not giving it until I get an approval. But the gun shop had the ultimate decision as to whether to release the firearm or not. So they would release the firearm and the people would get the gun. If the approval came in a month or two down the road, great, they already have their gun. Mm-hmm. If the denial came in a month or two down the road, they would contact the person and say, hey, you got to turn the gun back in because you're not allowed to have it. And they were supposed to go turn the gun back in. That's how it used to happen.
They would contact us and tell us to get the gun back.
And so then they changed the law. So after the shooting, they changed the law and they removed your ability as the store to release the firearm after the third day. So now a conditional non essentially has the same effect as a straight up denial because you cannot release the gun until the approval comes in. So you're seeing, so what's happening is because there's no longer that clock. Mm-hmm. There's no longer that 3 days where they're like, well, we better figure this out because the gun shop's going to give him the gun anyway. That since there's no clock there anymore, it's just like every other government bureaucracy. Since you don't have a deadline anymore, the shit just sits there.
Oh, they don't give a shit.
Correct. So, because before they wanted to know, because let's say they dicked around and you gave the gun to somebody and then it turned out, yeah, that guy couldn't have a gun. They look like the bad guy because they screwed around waiting for the background check. Well, now they know you can't release the gun, so they're not in a hurry to come up with the background check. So they're just basically sitting on these conditional nons. And it's a huge loophole in the law because there is no time frame for a conditional non. Right. Like if you get denied, if they do a straight up denial, you have a right to appeal. You have 60 days. You can fill out the appeal paperwork. You get the denial number from the shop and you get your fingerprints and you send, there's administrative action you can take with a denial.
Right.
If it's a conditional non, you can't do anything. You just have to sit and wait for the FDLE to decide whether to give you an approval or a denial. If they give you an approval, you can go pick up your gun. They give you a denial, you can do the appeal. But until they make one of those two decisions, they're just sitting on your conditional non. And now that there's no clock anymore, there's no time frame on it. And so the case is just sitting there. I've had people wait over a year to get an approval on a gun purchase because they're just in this limbo of conditional non.
Do you guys know what we're talking about?
Yeah. I was wondering, is there a way to speed it up? Can you call or is that bad?
No. I mean, you can keep calling, but you're going to get, the lady on the phone who's just going to be like, oh, you're in the queue and we'll get back to you when we get back to you. I mean, everybody should always call, the squeaky wheel kind of thing. But they often call the lawyers and there's nothing I can do about it. They can't file any sort of motion to compel them to do it or anything like that. Now, Florida Carey Inc. actually has a class action lawsuit pending right now for all these people who've been stuck in conditional nons. They're putting together a class action lawsuit to sue FDLE to say, hey, quit doing these conditional nons and hanging on to the people's stuff.
What do you think the percentage of people who are approved to be firearm owners and can't get firearms? Like, what do you think? Any guesses?
You mean that get approved, but they never should have they should have been denied, or
they get conditional non.
They get a conditional non,
and thus they are not able to exercise their Second Amendment.
It's most of them because now I'm going to give you the second point, which is you're asking why is it happening? Is it incompetence or whatever? Here's what I would say 99% of the cases are. When you get arrested for a charge, so the sheriff's department arrests you.
Right.
The sheriff's department logs into the state database with FDLE that they arrested you on a charge. So let's say it's some sort of felony, possession of cocaine, which is use something easy. So you get arrested for possession of cocaine. The sheriff's department reports that felony arrest to the FDLE and it gets put into your criminal database. Mm-hmm. Now your case goes through the system.
Yep.
When your case is over with, let's say the gentleman you were just talking about, let's say your case gets dropped and the state attorney's office drops the charges, or you're found not guilty at trial, or you get a withhold on and you don't get a felony conviction. When your case is over with, the clerk's office for the county that has your case has to send that paperwork to the FDLE so that they can say, hey, this felony arrest was resolved with the case being dropped. What is happening is the first is being reported, but the clerk's offices are not reporting the disposition.
Why?
Incompetence, overworked, underpaid. It's a government bureaucracy. It's the DMV for criminal files is basically all it is. And so they're just not doing it.
So it's not a conspiracy to keep guns out of people's hands.
I never contribute to conspiracy. What you contribute to incompetence and stupidity. And it's not even so much stupidity. It's like any other government thing. Again, they're overworked. They're underpaid. They're really short staffed. Basically every clerk's office in the state is probably operating at like a 60% capacity. They just don't have enough staff.
How's that
so
possible?
Things get backed up. They don't pay. It's like every other, McDonald's is understaffed. Like nobody wants to work these days. I'm sure you know as a business owner, finding good work is hard, and it's a government job. It's a thankless job. You get yelled at by the people at the clerk's office or who come into the office. You get yelled at by the judges. You get yelled at by attorneys. It's like working for the DMV. It's like any other government job. They're just always understaffed. When COVID came through, a lot of people left and then they never came back. You can't find good people to work these days. So they're just understaffed. So like some of the counties, when I file a document in a county, in the computer system, it's supposed to show up like immediately that it was filed. Mm-hmm. Some of the counties, it takes 2 or 3 weeks to go in because they're not logging them into the system because they just don't have enough staff. And that creates a problem when you're like filing emergency motions on cases and you go to court and the judge is like, I don't see your motion. It's not in the file. And you're like, well, I filed it 2 days ago or 3 weeks ago and it's just not in there yet. So what's happening is FDLE then gets the background check and it shows you were arrested for a felony, which would make you a prohibited person, obviously, if you were convicted, but they don't know the disposition and they don't have a mechanism to just call, the Sarasota County Clerk's office and say, hey, tell me what the disposition of this guy was while they're waiting for the background check to come through. So they give you the conditional non, and what they're supposed to do then is then do that investigation. Hey, let's send a letter to the clerk's office and say, provide me this guy's disposition so I know what happened to his case. So they're supposed to then take that extra time on the conditional non to figure out why they don't have your update.
Do you think
I've seen nothing to show that they're like doing it on purpose. It was clearly because you can see the delineating line from right after the law changed, where the 3-day thing went away. Immediately after the 3-day went away and they lost that clock, everything just started to get backlogged because now there's no reason for them to do their job quickly because the gun's not going anywhere.
Wow.
Can you skip all that by just getting expunged after you get done with court? And
what you can do, so for example, the guy comes in and he says, I've got my paperwork. They can call a lawyer, because what I would have them do then is everybody can go to the FDLE website and pay $25 and run a background check on themselves. They email it to you within like 5 minutes. Then I can read, because I know how to read criminal printouts.
Pay me $25.
Right.
You get it quick.
Right. They get it up there, and then I can read it, and I can say, look, here's an arrest for cocaine. Oh, look, the disposition is missing. Then I can contact the clerk's offices and say, hey, in case number blah, 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 you never reported this guy's disposition. Please report it.
It's a real fucking travesty because, as gun shop people, when you get a conditional non or you get a non-approval, you're just like, it's like someone who's trying to buy a car with bad credit. And due to time constraint and due to they're never going to be able to buy a gun, you move on, you become kind of calloused.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so it's ultimately something against the Second Amendment, which is an inalienable right. It's a God-given right to own a firearm in America. But what you suggest is if you get a conditional non-approval, go to their website, the FDLE, pay $25, get your background check.
Right.
Work with an attorney, figure out what's on there and where it came from.
Right.
And then once you see it, you can then hire said attorney. Is the fee a lot?
No, I don't usually charge a lot for that kind of stuff.
Okay. So you don't even charge. Why not?
Well, it's all paperwork. Two things. Number one, you have to know what the issue is. So many people call me because they come to the gun shop and they get a non. They don't know why, and they call me and they say, well, I need to fix it. Well, I don't know what to fix. Like, do you have a conviction? Do you have an injunction that you forgot about? Were you ever Baker acted 30 years ago? Like, you can't just come to me and say, fix my background, because I can't do that. So you have to have somewhere to start.
Okay, so the process to, if you get a conditional non, number one, if you get it, contact you. There's little cards over there that will supply the people. They should go to FDLE's website, download your background check, look at your background check. If there's something glaring obvious that's not correct, you then contract with you. You go to the opposing
whatever I need to do.
District.
Right? Clerk's office, whatever, yeah.
Now, how long, once you get up the clerk's butt, how long does it take them to get it to tally?
It's usually pretty quick, and a lot of it depends on the clerk's office. So, for example, obviously I'm here in Sarasota, so I know all the people who work at the Sarasota, the Manatee, and DeSoto clerk's offices. So I have specific people that I can call. The lawyers that represent the clerk's office, the actual elected clerk in one of the counties was a friend of mine. We used to work together at the state attorney's office. So, like, I know who to call for the local clerk's office to say, hey, this is the issue, and they'll do it real quick. If you call me and it's like Miami-Dade clerk's office, that may take a little bit longer. Obviously, you're right, because I don't have like a backdoor phone number to the Manatee or the Miami-Dade clerk, and they may have a backlog of people or whatever. So it shouldn't take more than a couple days once you point out to the clerk's office what the problem is. But again, it depends on how understaffed that.
Do all the gun shops know about this?
I mean, they should, but probably not. Most of them just, when somebody gets a conditional non, they just tell them to call me. Like everybody, all the shops around here have my cards. I drop off stacks all the time. So they just call me. So I get all these conditional nons. And what I tell people is, I can't help you right now. You need to get an idea of what your issue is, and then I can help you at that particular point. And if there's no issue, meaning, let's say, and this has happened, where you run the background check and it's clear that the person shouldn't get a conditional non, that they should be approved, there's still no way to force FDLE to do that, because there's no clock. That's when you go join the class action lawsuit and say, this is bullshit.
But can't the person say, look, I downloaded my legal record and there's nothing on there preventing me from owning a firearm?
Yeah, they can call FDLE and tell them that.
And that works, or
sometimes it depends on how helpful the person is who answers the phone. I mean, now we've sued, like, I work a lot with Florida Carey. Those guys do a lot of law. They're the lawsuit guys. So they file like the big lawsuits and the Second Amendment lawsuits. Obviously I don't do that. It's a little bit outside of my area. But I help them, so I can refer them cases, and sometimes I represent them on local things or whatever. So we have, through them, I say we, but me and them working together and whatever, we have sued FDLE and filed lawsuits against them that says, hey, this is bullcrap. Like, we had a guy that was clearly, I had all the documentation from his other state. He had a concealed carry permit in his other state. He had a concealed carry permit here. He had like all his military proper discharge, but like, we had a packet like this thick of all the reasons why he should be able to have one, and he still got a conditional non. And we sent that in a packet with a nasty letter that said, I don't know what the hell you guys are doing, but we're going to sue you because clearly he shouldn't have a conditional non.
Okay.
Within like 24 hours, they approved him. So sometimes if you can put something together like that, you can get something done. If you just call and say, hey, I got denied, I don't know why, what are you guys dicking me around for? I'm a perfectly good American citizen, they're going to hang up on you because they just don't have time for that kind of stuff. But, and not to say you need to hire a lawyer or whatever, but if you can put together the right paperwork and send it to the right people, you can get results.
It's, I mean, I wouldn't say it's heartbreaking, but it's definitely a fucking bummer. You know, you have to, it happens a lot. Like, people get conditional nons and and nothing gets resolved, and which essentially they can't own firearms, and which would cause them to commit crimes getting firearms.
Well, so I'll clarify a little bit. It's not that they can't own firearms. They won't pass a background check from a store.
Right.
So if they are in fact not a prohibited person, like the FDLE is making a mistake and they're allowed to possess a firearm, they can buy one from a private seller because they won't have to go through a background check. But so it's not like a blanket thing that says, oh, you got a conditional non, therefore you can't own any firearms. They can own firearms.
Yeah,
and they can purchase them from a private dealer, but they're not going to they're not passing the back, because it's not even that they failed the background check. Like,
Right.
they haven't been told you are definitely a prohibited person, you're denied. Then, of course, if you go out and buy from a private, they're committing a crime, and so is, everything else. But if you truly believe that you are not a prohibited person, and let's say you have documentation and a lawyer saying, like, I've told people, you're not a prohibited person, I've looked at everything, you're perfectly fine, but they still have a conditional non, that person can go out and buy from a private seller because they don't have to go through the background check, or they can get one from a friend or whatever. But it's definitely disheartening if you think you're a good citizen and you don't have anything in your background check, and you walk into a store and then someone looks at you and goes, I don't know what to tell you, man, but the FDLE said I can't give you this gun. And then you're thinking, well, what the hell's going on?
No, well, what I'm saying is they might go get their buddy to buy them that
Right,
AR,
then they might do it, right,
Then they do a straw
Then they do a
fail,
straw purchase,
and then
right.
and then the FFL can lose their license.
Correct. Yeah. Obviously, don't do straw purchases, and don't try and do that. And again, if you have a question about whether you're a prohibited person or not, you should not buy a gun from anybody, even a private dealer or a private person, until you figure that out.
What about Baker Act?
So, Baker
How do you
Act-
like?
Go
So
ahead.
we had a couple who bought like 20 grand worth of shit, like and just had a great time, spent a lot of money. It was glorious, and then fucking non-approval on the girl, and so we had to refund everything back. Like everything, and it was 20 grand, so it was a lot of money that was taken out of our pocket. But I think what happened with this individual was the person was Baker acted.
Right.
So how do you get your rights back when you're Baker acted?
So there,
Or should you even get your rights back?
yeah, no, you can, if you're Baker acted or Marchman acted. So Baker Act is when there's a mental health issue, you're a threat to yourself or others, and you get thrown into a mental health hospital. Then Marchman Act is if it's drugs or alcohol related. You're so intoxicated or impaired, law enforcement has the right to physically take you to the drunk tank, basically, or whatever. So there's two types of Baker Acts.
Has that happened to you, Luke?
No.
Marchman Act?
No? That's
Never.
good. Yeah.
Does that happen? That doesn't happen a lot up in
It happens a lot in Michigan.
Michigan.
Yeah, I'm sure, yeah. It's old. There's nothing to do with drink. It happens a lot around here, but Marchman Acts aren't as big a deal, though, because it's usually just because the person's like drunk right now. So, right, you take them in, you put them in the mental health hospital, in 24 hours they let them go because they sober up. It's not really an underlying psychotic issue. You see a lot more Baker Acts, obviously. The Marchman Acts the cops do to get the homeless drunks off the street. They put them in the jail for 8 hours and they let them go because they sober up. But there's what's important is there's police action Baker Acts and there's court action Baker Acts. What I mean by that is if you're walking down the street talking to the Martians and you're like threatening people that walk by or whatever, law enforcement has a right to detain you right then and transport you to the mental health facility under a Baker Act.
Okay.
And they check you in. They're allowed to hold you there for 72 hours just based on the cop bringing you in. If before that 72 hours, they determine that you're no longer a threat to yourself or others and they just release you, there's no court action there. It doesn't show up on any database that you were Baker acted because there's no court case, there's no medical record or anything along those lines because you were released within the 72 hours. That type of Baker Act will not make you a prohibited person. It will not show up on a background check. You will be just fine. If you hit the 72-hour mark and they still believe you're a threat to yourself or others, the doctors will petition the court to sign a court order keeping you under that Baker Act past the 72 hours. Once there's court action, that is what goes on your background check, and that is what triggers the prohibited person section of the federal statute. So lots of people get Baker acted, but that doesn't mean that they're a prohibited person.
Yeah, but okay. Well, on the form it says, "Have you ever been adjudicated mentally defective?"
That's by a court.
Oh, that's by a court.
That's what I'm saying. The court action is where the adjudicated, I think it actually says by a court or whatever, but it's the adjudication by a court of competent jurisdiction or whatever the language is in there. So it's the court adjudication.
Omar,
The
will you
cop-
go grab a form?
Sure.
Yeah, the cop is not adjudicating you anything. He's just taking you off the street to protect you and everybody else. The doctors haven't adjudicated you or anything because they let you go within 72 hours because you were no longer a threat to yourself or others. It's only when there's a court order that forces you to stay there past that 72-hour hold against your will that the statute kicks in.
Okay. So, okay. Have you ever been adjudicated as a mental defective, or have you ever been committed to a mental institution? So my problem with that,
But both of those require court actions because you're only committed by a court.
it doesn't say that though.
But that's what the legal definition of committed is.
So
when you
here's
look at the federal statute, when it labels what a prohibited person is, and you go to the mental health section, it talks about the court action.
So I mean, it's not that I want to give guns to crazy people, but
Right.
but so the problem is when somebody looks at this question, they're like, well, I've been Baker acted.
Right.
Okay, and immediately if somebody says I've been Baker acted, the sale ends.
Right.
Like that's what the ATF teaches us. And if the customer by mistake puts yes on here,
Right.
as opposed to no because they don't know, then it's game over. You never buy a firearm again. I mean, it's.
But I'm just telling you that's not what the law says.
Okay.
You could say it's a confusing question, I guess, and it probably is because most people don't understand what the difference is. But I'm telling you, if you've been scooped off the street by a cop, but you were released before the end of the 72 hours and there was no court action, you are not a prohibited person under the federal statute and you can purchase a firearm.
So how about
So those people can legally mark no on that box because they haven't been adjudicated mentally defective or committed to a facility.
well, what about so let's say if you have been committed to a facility, can you ever
Yes.
get your firearm rights back?
So because it requires a court action,
Okay.
then the clerk's office opens up a case. It's a MH is the code for mental health. So there's going to be a mental health case that says Judge so-and-so signed an order of commitment on this date. The statute in Florida allows you to file a motion to overturn that order and for the judge to reinstate your firearm rights. I've done it dozens of times. So you just file a motion in the court file. You go and have a hearing in front of the judge. The person usually comes. Lots of times they bring character witnesses and you basically say, look, 5 years ago, I was Baker acted because I had a mental health issue. I'm perfectly fine now. I haven't had any problems in 5 years. I got a good job. I got a good wife. Here's my mom. She's going to come in and say that he's doing good. The boss or their employee is going to come in and say they're doing good. Lots of times, even the person who may have started the commitment, let's say a girlfriend called 5 years ago and said, hey, he's threatening himself. Please Baker act him. And then now that's the wife. The wife can come in and say, yes, I'm the one who called 5 years ago and he's perfectly fine now. And the judge gets all that information, and then the judge basically signs a thing that says, okay, he's perfectly fine now, firearm rights restored. And then that form has to be sent from the clerk to FDLE for them to update their background check, and then the person now has their firearm rights restored.
Okay.
So yes, both Marchman and Baker Acts, if either one of those had any court action, then you can file a motion to restore your firearm rights in that court action.
Those motions, do you see those usually being approved?
I've never lost one.
Okay.
Yeah. Because it's usually a long time.
Right.
Like it's not like somebody just got out of the mental health hospital and 3 days later they try and go buy a gun. It's usually people who forgot about it.
We had that one time.
Oh, really? Yeah. Well, good thing they got denied. It's usually people that forgot about it.
Right.
Like they were Baker acted once 15, 20 years ago and they didn't think it was a big deal. And now all of a sudden they want to buy a gun and they go buy one, they get denied and they find out there's a Baker Act. Like most people don't know that goes on their record. Because again, that's another thing that they don't tell you. Like the judge doesn't sign the order and then say, oh, by the way, you can never own a gun again. They just sign an order that says keep them for 72 hours. So people don't know that affects their ability to buy a gun, and they just go in and buy a gun and then find out that they had a Baker Act.
How many people do you work with a month who like with firearms problems?
I don't know. It's probably, I mean, I can't put a number on people, but it's probably 75% of my business.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, whether it's criminal, whether it's conditional nons, whether it's restoration of rights. I've been getting a lot of restoration of rights cases over the last couple of years because, you know, the world's kind of going to shit and all these people are like, oh, I never wanted a gun before, but now I want a gun. And then I went to buy one and didn't realize that my felony charge from 10 years ago said I couldn't have a gun. So then they call and they want to restore their rights. So a lot of people are trying to restore their rights.
They can always get a crossbow.
Well, yeah, because there's a lot of people that can't restore their rights because there's rules for that. And so I just tell them, yeah, you can get a crossbow. Well, there's time frames on it. So, for example, it has to be 8 years from the completion of your sentence. So you have to get your charge, get your sentence, finish your sentence, including paying all fines and court costs, wait 8 years from the end of that sentence, then you can fill out your application to apply to have your rights restored. So a lot of people, it's too early because they didn't wait the 8 years. There's certain crimes you can't do it for.
So you can commit felonies and then you can go through the actual paperwork that's involved to restore your rights to own a firearm?
Yes, there's a process in Florida where you can restore your firearm rights if you're a prohibited person.
Did you guys know that?
No.
It's not just felonies. It's also like domestic, as you know, misdemeanor domestic battery convictions also make you a prohibited person. So whatever the criminal restriction is, felony conviction or misdemeanor crime of domestic violence, you can file paperwork. It's a clemency petition that you fill out the paperwork. Again, you get character witnesses and stuff, and they write about how different of a person you are or whatever. And you send the package up to Tallahassee to the clemency board. The clemency board looks over your package, and then they can either just approve it off the paperwork. They can also deny it off the paperwork because that depends on the crime. And then you can also, or they'll assign an investigator to conduct a hearing, and it's kind of like a parole hearing. You go in there and, why should we give you a gun? Why do you want one? What's different about your life? And your witnesses can come in, and your lawyer can represent you. And then they basically make recommendations to the governor of, say, these are the people we decided this month should have their rights restored. And they just send it to the governor. The governor signs it. And then you get a letter that says, congratulations, your rights are restored. It gets updated to FDLE and you can go buy a gun.
So it does get updated in FDLE.
Correct.
You see that happening, and then they can actually fill out a 4473.
Yeah.
So it's amazing.
And they actually get the letter too. Again, it's an order from it's similar to think of it as a pardon. It's basically just a blanket thing that the governor signs that says you get your gun back. It's just you don't have to golf with the governor on the weekend or be the son of the president to get your pardon. You can go through the statutory system that we have set up in Florida. Now, the problem with the system is it's like everything else I've been talking about. They're understaffed and underfunded. So it's not like when the 8 years hits, you send your paperwork in and like a month later you get your hearing and then you get a thing from the governor. Sometimes you could be on a backlog for years waiting to even get to the next step because they just have so many applications.
How is anything underfunded when we have lotto, gambling resorts?
Well, it depends on where the money goes. Yeah, it depends on where the money goes.
You know what I mean?
I mean, as you can imagine, if you're a politician, running on a platform of let's fund giving felons their gun rights back, you're not going to get a lot of votes with that. So it doesn't get a lot of, as far as a budgetary thing goes, the clemency office as a whole is certainly one of the lower funded offices because most people don't care about, restoring rights for convicted felons.
So as far as the form goes, if you get a pardon or clemency, do you still mark yes on the form? Or because if we saw that, we would immediately say, no, but
get out.
Technically,
exactly, get out.
Technically, they have been convicted of a felony,
No, you can mark no.
Okay.
So once your firearm rights, this federal statute actually says, once your firearm rights are restored, you are allowed to mark no on the form.
Okay. All right. It's good.
It's a specific thing, I believe, but I'm highly confident there's a specific thing in the federal statute. It's even on the ATF website. When you look up what the rules are, it'll tell you that if your firearm rights have been restored, you can mark no on that question. Right, because it gets confusing because you say, well, yes, I have, but I also have them restored. And then you guys are going, well, tough shit. You marked yes. So
right.
I can't even do it.
Yeah.
I understand that. Yeah. But no, again, that's another thing they don't tell people, though. So, right, you get the letter from congratulations, your gun rights have been restored. By the way, make sure you mark no on question 7. No, they just say your gun rights have been restored. And then it's a confusing question when people come in here because they're like, well, wait a minute. So whenever I get the order from, like at a Baker Act, when I get the order from the judge restoring it, I make sure to tell my clients, you can mark no on that form now because you've had your rights restored. Okay. So don't go in there and still mark, oh, yes, I have been, because now you're going to be screwed.
Did you guys have any questions for Jeff from last time? Because I remember like when he left, we were like, oh man, we should have asked him about that.
I don't remember if I got answered, but everyone always asks it. As far as like carry guns, home defense guns, and upgrades on your guns, triggers, lights, anything, red dots, does this make it bad in the eyes of the law?
So what I always tell people about it, I get questions about that all the time. And if people go to my YouTube channel, I actually did a whole video on do upgrades to your guns and stuff, make a difference. The answer is no. I have never seen a case where a prosecutor says, oh, he's got a Johnny Glock trigger on there, therefore he's out looking to shoot people. It's either a legitimate self-defense shoot or it's not. Now, if what I tell people to do is don't write stupid shit on your gun. So if you put on there, look at the flash and smile, Deadpool style, or let God sort them out later. If you put that stuff on your guns, or was it the United Healthcare guy had like something written on his bullet casings or whatever about killing those people? Yeah. So if you write stuff like that on your gun, yeah, I could see a prosecutor going, oh, look what he's got on his firearm. But if it's just a standard upgrade that you would do, better sights, better trigger or whatever, I tell people you make your gun the way you think you need it to be to protect yourself and your family, and then worry about anything that happens in court later.
Okay. So along with more proficient, it's okay. Just
correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I just tell people not to go stupid with it. I get the same thing about training, because as stupid as it sounds, like if people get so much training that they're really good at it, they're worried about, well, are they going to come in and be like, look, why was this guy taking so many gun classes? Why was he going to the gun range so much? He's clearly a nut and he's just looking to shoot somebody. And it's like, oh, it's actually the opposite. The reason I'm going to all that training is so I can better protect myself if I need to. So it's the same thing. Just you do what you got to do to make yourself able to defend yourself and your family, and then we can sort everything out in court later. But I have never seen a case where a prosecutor has argued because they had an upgraded trigger or they took the FBI qualification course as a training thing, that means they're overly aggressive with their firearm.
Yeah.
But that's just in Florida. You're not looking nationwide, right?
Well, I'm a Florida attorney, so every bit of advice I give is always Florida related. Because like this, all my conversations about filing motions for Baker Acts and restoration of rights, that is all Florida.
It may be different
specific. Every state has, with a few of the real crazy lefty ones, but every state has a provision for restoring your firearm rights once they're taken away. And so you got to do that. And that's the other thing to remember is only the state that took your rights away can give it back. So if you got a felony conviction in Michigan and you move down to Florida, I can't do jack shit for you in Florida with restoring your rights, and Florida can't do anything with you for restoring your rights. You got to go file whatever paperwork Michigan requires for you to restore your rights. You can only have your rights restored in the state that took them away.
Those fucking people in Michigan are crazy.
Yeah.
They worship the bear. Did you know that?
No, they worship the Wolverine.
Exactly. Yeah.
The Wolverine. What about you, Omar? Did you have any questions for Jeff that you didn't get answered last time?
No, that was I guess it's kind of different. I had seen some talk about like the argument being made that specific hollow point rounds could be brought up against you.
I mean, again, anything can be brought up against you if the prosecutor wants to, but as long as it's for self, your standard thing, you'll be fine. Like I've never seen anything about it, because it's all usually going to come down to what the facts of the case are. You're either in self-defense or you're not in self-defense. If it could go either way, then I don't think it's going to matter what kind of bullet you're carrying, because you're going to have to justify why you pulled the trigger, whether you had full slugs in there or hollow points or whatever. It doesn't really matter.
There was also the thing of when I lost it.
It's the great Red Bull talking.
Yeah,
the great Red Bull talking.
It always comes to people later on. The clients are the same way. You have a 2-hour conversation with them, they leave, and then like they call 5 minutes later. Oh, I forgot to ask you this. I'm like, well, we were just here for like 2 hours. So
what happened to the
stuff comes later?
What happened to the yard pop guy?
So I ended up. It's funny that you remember that case. So I ended up having the person just do a gun safety class, like a weekend gun safety class, and they dropped charges because I filed a motion to dismiss. Because I said this isn't a crime, and I cited all of the statutes and everything. You want to tell the
folks at home just a refresher what the gun pop guy was?
Yeah, so it was just somebody who was kind of in an argument with one of their neighbors, and the neighbor was way down. There weren't any people around or whatever. The neighbor was way down, and the person just came out and fired one shot directly into the ground, like into their own front yard on their own property. Nobody else was around or nothing, into the dirt, and then went back inside. They called the cops. The cops came out and they arrested the person for discharging a firearm in a residential neighborhood. But that doesn't count, because you can discharge in a residential neighborhood. You just can't do it in a reckless or a negligent manner. And shooting it straight down in the ground with no people near you is not in a reckless or dangerous manner in my mind. So I filed a motion to dismiss and said this isn't a crime, and I cited all the statutes. I even put some case law in there. And then the prosecutor called up and was like, hey, can you just get her to do like a a safety class or something
her-
and give
it
me a
was a girl?
certificate and we'll drop it.
It was a girl.
Hypothetically, non-tentatively binding. I don't know. It could be a guy.
Whoa.
But this person just took one of those standard 4-hour safety classes, either here or at Take Aim or something. I don't know. I emailed the certificate to the prosecutor. They dropped the case.
So you've had your little thing here, like your little marketing thing for years, and you could really have quite a business if people like if all the guys in every gun shop knew. Here you go. You've got a conditional non, or you're having problems. You want to restore your rights? Call Jeff. Because we don't do that.
Well, you should. I know. I've been running this shop for like 10 years. I have all my shit sitting over there on the counter. Like pretty much every gun shop, all of my gun businesses come from the gun shops. Every phone call is, I got your name down at the range. I got your name from Shark Coast. I got your name from Take Aim. I was at Nice Trail the other day. And every gun case I get somehow comes from either one of the shops or one of the self-defense trainers around that teaches like classes on the weekends.
I think that if you went to every shop and said, hey, look, like every time you get a conditional non-approval, give them this little piece of paper, give them my card, and ask them to look me up.
Yeah,
we're not doing that.
Well, that's on you and your employees, man. I mean, if you want me to design something,
the problem is it gets fucking heated. Like people don't like being told like you can't.
Sure.
Like look, something's on your record,
right?
And they're like, nothing's on my record. I'm like, did you plead no contender or something?
Right.
I don't know what I did. I just got out of it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Dude, people call me and they're angry. Like they call and they call and yell at me. This is bullshit. I've been I've 50 years. I've never been in trouble and whatever. Like I get yelled at by strangers who call me on the phone because they're like, I got a conditional non and when can I sue? How can I go to the governor? And I'm like, yes, that's not how that works. Like that's not how that works. So yeah, it's just kind of it's certainly a frustrating thing. I can only imagine. I mean, if it happened to me, I'd be, what the hell's going on? And then you start thinking, well, what else does the government have on me or think that I did that is wrong? I mean,
it happened to me.
It's certainly understandable.
I pay my taxes.
Right. Yeah.
Like I like when I tried to buy my first firearm, I got a non-approval.
Yeah.
And it was at the Palmetto Gun Show, and I tried to buy a Ishivek AK-74, and I wanted to buy an AK, and I remember talking to Pompano Pawn at the time. Like they were there way back when, and I said, well, why do I want the 74? And the guy was like, because the ammo's cheaper with the 74, and I'm like, okay. And so I found a guy who had one, and it was perfect. It was perfect, and I got a non-approval, and I'm like, fuck, how did I get a non-approval? And I had to figure it out on my own. Like it's exactly what you said. The clerk didn't send the paperwork from the court case to Tallahassee.
Right.
I had to go find out exactly what I did wrong. And then there was clearly a mistake from Sarasota County to Tally. And it took a year for me to do it. And I remember a lawyer was like, if you pay me $3,000, I'll figure it out. And I was like, I don't have $3,000. I can't do that.
Yeah, that's unfortunately a lot of the it's the way a lot of my conversations go too. I'm like, yeah, well, I can fix it for you, and this is what it's going to be, and then I never hear back from him again because unfortunately, it's just look, it just costs money to do that kind of stuff. So,
but the reality is, I ran around with something on my record for years,
right?
And that was one of the things that precipitated me getting a license because I got so pissed off. I was like, man, I'm going to get every fucking license I can.
Well, here's what I understand. You said you were at the Palmetto Gun Show.
Yep.
I've been told that there's a gun show loophole that you can just buy whatever the hell you want and not have to go through a background check. I'm confused.
No, I had to do a background check and I got a non-approval.
That's weird.
Obama said it.
Yeah, that's a gun show loophole. That's weird. I don't know why.
It was back like 2007, 2008. Like it was $425.
Oh, that was the Bush years, and Obama came in and sealed the gun show loophole. That's what the problem.
Yeah,
I don't know.
But I think
and then it starts to pile up. So like they're like, look, I just paid $1,000 for the gun, and now I got to pay $1,500 or whatever for a lawyer. And then they start thinking, well, is it really worth $3,000 or whatever to do all this work? So unfortunately, that's a cost benefit analysis that a lot of people make. I mean, if they're serious gun owners then and they'll be pissed off about it, they'll hire somebody. But if it's like their first gun, or they're just like, well, I wanted to go buy one just because I thought it would be cool, they don't have two nickels to rub together. They have enough just to maybe buy a gun. They're not going to have thousands of dollars to pay a lawyer to try and fix their background, because it's not that important to them. It's the only thing that's denying them is a gun, which they never really cared too much about having in the first place, and they just move on.
So it's backdoor gun control by default.
It can
by default.
It can be, yeah. Well, I mean, look, it's all gun control. I mean, you guys know me. I'm an absolutist. It says shall not be infringed. Period. There's no comma unless you're a convicted felon. Comma unless you have a Baker Act. Comma unless Nancy Pelosi doesn't like you. Like, there's no commas in there.
No, it's inalienable.
So to me, everything is gun control. Whether it's not backdoor, it's in your face. It's like, here's a law that says you can't have a gun because we don't like what you did, whatever. You can't have a gun because you don't live in Hawaii or what. Like, it's all unconstitutional gun control as far as I'm concerned. So if you didn't have background checks, none of this would happen. You come in here and buy a gun, and that's your Second Amendment right. You go commit a crime with it, you get arrested and prosecuted for the crime. Like, to me, none of it makes any sense.
That's really how I thought it was when I came here. I really thought so.
Oh, yeah. We're the gunshine state, right? People just buy guns in mailboxes and walk around and shoot guns in the air.
You read the Constitution like it's a vacation pamphlet before you come.
Right, yeah.
You just open up social media telling you can walk into a Walmart and buy a fucking cannon.
Yeah.
It's like, fuck yeah.
Yeah, no,
I want to live there.
Yeah.
What do you think about
it's all crap.
The well-regulated part of the Second Amendment? What do you say to the people that, quote that as to why there should be regulations on firearms?
Well, it's just people that don't understand how the English language is set up. So that's what we call a preparatory statement, which says we need a well-regulated militia. It's just a blank statement. Here's how we make sure we can have a well-regulated militia: is everybody gets to have a gun, because the militia are, of course, as we all know, made up of the citizens, and so it's not a condition participle or whatever the hell they call those things. It's just a preparatory statement. It's the declaratory statement as to why individual gun ownership is correct. So to me, I just tell them that's go back to elementary school and figure out how to read the English language. Figure out what commas mean, figure out what periods mean. The other thing you should always do is what you learn in law school is you learn about statutory construction. So you go back and you find out the people who wrote the statute, what was their intent. And so you go back and you read, like if it's a current law, you go back and read the notes from the House floor and what the committee recommendations and notes are, and you get an idea of what the legislative intent is. Well, you can easily do that with every amendment in the Constitution, because all those guys wrote articles and letters and had declaratory statements. It was all written down. So it's pretty easy when you go back and look at what was being said about the Second Amendment and the people who actually physically wrote it.
What was being said about the Second Amendment? What have you read?
That it was an intentional, there's an individual right. The actual author of the Second Amendment, I'm just drawing a blank on his name right now, but he literally said, "We are the militia." Like that's his statement that's attributed to him. So
was it James Madison or was it Thomas Jefferson?
No, it was not one of the super famous ones. You could Google it real quick, but he basically said, "We are the militia." So the understanding is that the militias are made up of the individual people out on the street, and the individual people on the street should have all the guns necessary to be in the militia.
It is Madison.
Yeah. Was it Madison?
Yeah.
There you go.
Also,
I was wrong.
One thing that I had heard is the word regulated, the definition has changed. Back in the 1700s, well-regulated meant well-functioning.
Sure.
Well-trained. That was the meaning of the word regulated at the time, in the same way that the meaning of the word militia has changed. Militia, in the context of the 1700s, meant any white man.
Everybody walking around the street, right? Yeah, correct. Yeah. Now they think of it as the National Guard is what people now believe is the militia. They're just citizens, and then you call them up and say, "Hey, show up and bring," and not even show up and bring your guns though, because we're keeping all your guns here on the property, and we'll give them to you when you show up. Well, that's clearly not what it was like in 1776, because they didn't even have a standing army. So no, it's just an excuse for people to come up with why they should say you shouldn't have an individual right. And the good news is in Bruin a couple of years ago, they ruled that, actually it was in Heller, they ruled that it is an individual right, and then Bruin upheld that it was an individual right. So it's sort of settled law at this particular point, but who knows?
I think the modern reading would be a well-trained populace being necessary
Correct.
for the security of the
well-armed populace,
Yeah.
well-trained, or yeah, exactly. So
Hell yeah.
The right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So I'm a period guy. So that would, that would take away all of the hassles that you run into with background checks if they just got rid of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's not happening.
Well, no, it's not going to, and that's unfortunately the reality that we live in. Is you have to find your way to work around it.
What have you seen with red flag laws when they got created in Florida after the Pulse shootings? Or was it after not the Pulse shootings?
No, it was after the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas Act, right? It was created in the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas Act. So that act,
like, have you
horrible?
Have you defended a lot?
Yeah,
you have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do a lot of red flag law cases.
Obviously, no one's going to come to you and say I deserve a red flag law. But do you see? What's the percentage of people who actually need it and don't need it?
Again, I hesitate to say anybody needs it because it's always an infringement. What I can say is that there are some red flag cases that come in that are clearly BS, basically, and you have a hearing and you fight it and you win, and then the person gets their guns back. They never should have been taken in the first place. A lot of them that come in are not independent, though. It's not like the person is just walking around the street and they decide to take their guns away. It's usually coupled with either a Baker Act,
okay,
or some other criminal charge. So, for example, you get a road rage incident, you're going to get arrested and charged with aggravated assault with a firearm. They're also going to hit you with a red flag law because they're going to say you're obviously dangerous with your firearm because you're committing crimes with it. So they'll often be tied together. And lots of times, even though you might want to fight.
So local law enforcement's doing it.
Well, they have to. It's only law enforcement that can do red flag laws.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
In the state of Florida, a person can't do it. So your neighbor can't have you red flagged. Your neighbor would call the police and say, the guy next to me is waving his gun around, says he's going to kill everybody in the neighborhood. Police would go knock on the guy's door. And if the guy's all perfectly calm and he's like, yeah, that bitch just doesn't like me, they're just, they can't do anything. They just walk away. Okay. But if they open the door and the guy's naked, waving a firearm around saying, I'm going to kill everybody in the neighborhood.
I'm naked.
Right. Then law enforcement will Baker Act him, number one, and they will do the affidavit to what they saw to have him Baker acted. They have to confirm it. It can't just be because your girlfriend calls up and goes, oh, he threatened me, and then they take him and Baker Act him. They have to find some confirming evidence of what the person is saying is happening. So all Baker Acts are law enforcement initiated. That's the only way they can be done.
What kind of increase in red flag cases did you see after the law was enacted?
So it's been kind of like a bell curve. So right after it was enacted, you didn't see a lot because people were still trying to figure out what to do,
okay,
and how they work.
Do you guys know what he's talking about? What we're talking about?
Yeah.
You do know, Omar?
It's a risk protection orders, or the official word is risk protection orders. Red flag is a slang word. So you saw kind of a bell curve. So in the beginning, people didn't really know how to use them yet, and so they were kind of hesitant. Then once they figured out how to use them, they were freaking using them like all the time. Like every sheriff's and every police department started slapping them on basically everybody that they could.
Why?
Anytime you give the government a new authority, guess what they're going to do with it? Exercise the authority.
Abuse it.
So basically, yeah. So they went to all these law enforcement people who, don't kid yourselves, as much as you want to back the blue or whatever, and I'm not saying I have a problem with law enforcement, but a lot of law enforcement people are not pro Second Amendment. They think they should have the guns, but they don't like people walking around on the street having guns. The only reason we do not have open carry in the state of Florida is because the Florida Sheriff's Association is adamantly against it. And they go up to Tallahassee every year and lobby against all the elected representatives and say, we don't want this. And if you pass it, we're never going to support you again. So it's the sheriff's departments who right now are keeping open carry in the state of Florida. So they're not superly pro Second Amendment. So they got this power and they're like, ooh, let's start using it like they always do. And then it kind of went up. You're seeing lately, though, it kind of coming down. And I think it's part of this overall trend that you see in America with like Trump getting elected and just like a lot of it's swinging back to conservative again and pro-constitution and less government. So you saw this kind of spike, and then now you see them starting to come. They're still doing them, but I don't see them as much as I did maybe 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago. So I think a lot of it's calmed down a little bit because I think they realized maybe they overshot it. You started getting a lot of complaints from the NRA and from Florida Carey. There were a lot of lawsuits against certain sheriffs and departments for abuse of them and not following what the rules are. And so you start to see them kind of coming down now. So you don't get as many. The ones that you get now are clearly related to something. Like you're not just getting the random guy that didn't get arrested and didn't get Baker acted. They're just trying to take their guns. They're always somehow associated with like a bigger crime.
So do you think
they're still bad though and unconstitutional as fuck?
So what was the law that changed everything in Florida?
That was the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas Act.
The Marjorie Stoneman Douglas Act.
Correct.
And what that did was that took away 18-year-olds' ability to buy firearms. It took away the conditional non thing, and it
added the red flag.
And it added red flag law.
It did a bunch of other stuff. Like it did, and that's where you got your Guardian program from. All the cops that are now at the schools, and that also came out of the same act. Did it like
make background checks more intense?
No.
The background checks are the same.
Yeah, because they can't change the background checks. Like there's only a certain limited things that prohibit you from being a convicted felon or being a firearm purchaser. That's federal. The states can't add prohibited things.
Are there any cases, or are there any like you could really get into the whole, taking an 18-year-old's right away to buy a firearm is unconstitutional.
Right.
Like, I mean, that's completely unconstitutional.
Yeah, no, there's a lawsuit in the state of Florida right now. Again, I think it was done by Florida Carey or Florida Concealed Carry. It's pending right now. So there's been lawsuits in other states on the 18-year-old thing. Most of them have actually been pretty successful. They've been upheld, but then of course it's got to go through the full appellate system, so it's not like a statewide thing. And then we do have one pending here in Florida, but I believe they just said that oral arguments weren't going to be scheduled on that until like February of 2026 or something like that. They're like 18 months out or something. Yeah.
Why?
Dude, welcome to the court system, man. The only thing that moves slower than the FDLE and the clerk's office is the judicial system. It's just the way that it works.
I mean, the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas shooting was definitely a tragedy, but it did enact a whole bunch of shit, which is unconstitutional.
Yeah, that was a complete knee-jerk reaction. I mean, they just were like, we got to do something. And so again, there is a lot of good stuff in there. That's where your Guardian program came. They gave extra money so the schools could fortify and have the better gates and stuff. But then you got those three things that were just brutal. The 18-year-olds, the risk protection, and what was the other one that we said? Anyway, there's at least two of them in there that are just they're just
the red flag, 18-year-old,
and the 3-day and removal of the 3-day thing. Right, those three things were god awful. There's actually a better chance because with the current legislatures that are in Florida, they are actually putting in bills to change it back from 18 or from 21 back to 18, and there's a good chance that's going to get out of committee this time and get a vote, because I think what's happening there is the compromise, because you have everybody wanting open carry again and putting a lot of pressure on open carry. So I think what they're going to try and do is pass back to 18 in hopes of getting the concealed carry people off their ass.
Argentina just did it.
Yeah. Yeah, no. And they're not even allowed to have guns down there. It's weird. Yeah. But the sheriff's department or the sheriff's associations are not as opposed to the 18 and 21 thing as they are open carry. So I think there might be some wheeling and dealing going on through that. So you might see, before you get to that oral argument in 18 months, you might actually see the law change in Florida this legislative session. I give it a 50-50 shot that it'll go back to 18 this year.
It's
red flags aren't going anywhere though.
I mean, there should be, I mean, I guess it's above my pay grade, but like having 18-year-old children. I mean, I'm not, but it's your right. You can't get away from that. Like whatever my personal feelings of the 18-year-old kids that I know, like it's their inalienable right to own a firearm, and that trumps everything.
Well, and to me,
what are you gonna say, Omar?
I don't know where the 18 comes from, because again, you go back historically when the Constitution was written in 76 or around then. The freaking 13 and 14-year-olds were walking around with their right. They were in the military. They're the ones that were getting drafted into the militia. So, like, you could put an age limit on things like drinking because there's no constitutional right to drink alcohol. I don't know where you'd even get an 18-year-old age limit to purchase a firearm or possess a firearm or whatever out of the Constitution, because again, there's no qualifier, there's no comma unless you're a certain age, because that's just an arbitrary age. You just pull 18 out of a hat and go, oh, okay, 18 makes you an adult. That's just an age they made up, decades ago so they could have the draft. So the issue for me is I don't know why there's any age on there. You should be able to come in with your parent and buy a gun, and then just like anything else, you should be able to come in and buy a gun, whatever, without any sort of restrictions on that as age. It may sound crazy and stupid, and the shops, it would be up to the shops to have individual policies, just like every other product we have out there that says, I'm not going to sell a firearm to anybody who's under the age of 18. It's like a tattoo shop. Like, I'm not going to give a tattoo to a 5-year-old or a 10-year-old. Like, they got to, that's up to the shop owners and the parents to make those decisions for the children. It's not up to the government.
What are you going to say, Omar?
But I'm a small government guy.
I was going to say at 18 years old, you can move into your own place, start a family, have a kid, be living completely on your own with a wife and kids and all that. And for 3 years, you can't
protect yourself, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't protect yourself.
Right. Now, you can own a gun. You're just not going to pass a background check.
Right, and it's control.
Well, yeah, it's regulation like everything else.
What do you think of the Daniel Penny case? To segue to something different.
So, I mean, like pretty much I think everybody else in America, I consider the guy a hero. I think he did what he should have done. I think the prosecution was clearly political in nature. That was all based from Alvin Bragg and, the same guy that went after Trump or whatever. That's just a political prosecution. He never should have been prosecuted. Obviously, I'm glad he was found not guilty, but he had to go through, a year of hell and probably tens of thousands of dollars in legal fees, and there's nothing you can do about that.
Think how much that is.
They can
it's probably $1 million.
It's probably way more than that, yeah.
Yeah,
I don't know
$1 million.
And he didn't have it, so he may have, maybe he raised funds from charities or whatever, I don't know, or maybe they cut their fees because it was a bullshit case. I don't know, but it's certainly lots of money, lots of time out of his life for a prosecution that never should have happened.
And can you tell us like what you know of like past cases that you've represented?
What do you mean?
Like Jessica. Do you remember when you represented her? Who like
fresh metal recollection? In what concept? Like a felony case, like a shooting case, a gun case, a murder trial?
Yeah.
Like, what do you want to know? How do you do that?
No, like whatever happened to her, him.
I don't remember. Oh, okay. Now,
Yeah.
all right. Yeah, you had to be a little more specific there.
Yeah.
I actually ended up not finishing up. I didn't actually represent her in that case because, again, they couldn't come up with the money. I believe I met maybe with this person a couple different times and we talked about it or whatever, but I ultimately didn't end up.
Yeah, you asked me
being the attorney in that
you
case.
asked me to buy their guns.
Well, they wanted to sell their guns to pay my fee because they didn't have them, and then there was an issue of who had the combinations. Yeah, that was a whole big thing.
deal.
I can't tell you exactly what ultimately happened to that. I believe there was a conviction. I mean, I think based on what I knew about the case, that's probably what was going to happen. So, but I stopped following it. Once I didn't get paid, it wasn't my case anymore. I didn't follow it. But yeah, it's a weird, it's interesting because there are boring cases. Every DUI is basically the same. So when you've done 1,000 DUIs, it kind of gets boring. And every now and then you'll get a weird case. So yeah, I got a drive-by shooting case coming up.
What's that about?
Just drive-by shooting. Figure it out. These people don't like these people, and it's just the drive-by shooting. So
How do you prove that it's that it's like what they saw the car?
So
And then how do you defend
I can't really
it?
talk about this case because it's still pending. But let's take a hypothetical case. I've had a few drive-by shooting cases, and there's two issues with drive-by shootings. Is number one, you can usually never see who's in the car because it's a drive-by shooting and everybody's ducking behind stuff. So there's never an ID. There's never anybody that says that was definitely Joe. I saw him stick his head out of the car, and so it was him.
It was Luke.
There's usually a vehicle description. Sometimes
Tech
people will
9.
get a license plate.
He has a Tech 9.
Does he hold it this way?
Yes, he does. I've seen him.
That'll do it. You always have to hold it this way. That way you make sure you get all the innocent bystanders and not the actual person. Because that's the funny thing. Because my wife always used to say that, like, the gang guy will get shot like 6 times and he'll be fine. He'll get out of the hospital in like 3 days. And then like the non-gang person gets nicked in the leg and then it cuts their artery and they die like 2 hours later. It's always like the bad guy that walks away. That's why 50 Cent's still walking around. But
They got Tupac though.
yeah, they did. So it's one of those things where drive-by shootings, they usually get a very good vehicle description, or there's generally an idea of who was it, because there's always some sort of beef or something going on between a certain number of people. So if Mike is the one getting shot at, is probably Joe, because Mike and Joe don't like each other. And so then they go out and they just start talking to people who know Joe or whatever and trying to figure out where he is. A lot of things these days, people get caught by cameras, because there are freaking cameras everywhere. There's government cameras, not only government cameras, but every store has a camera. Everybody's got a Ring camera in their house. So nowadays, when there's a drive-by shooting, there's usually always a video either of the actual shooting, because there's Ring cameras out in the neighborhood, or the big church on the corner has a camera, or it's near a high school and they have a camera in the parking lot. So cameras are everywhere. So most of the cases, they can get a video of the suspect vehicle and some sort of a partial license plate or whatever. Then you just track down the registered owner and find out who was driving at last, and then they just circle around, and then they find you. Then what normally happens is there's more than one person in the car, because there's usually at least a driver and a shooter, and last times there's 3 or 4 people in the car. So then they just figure out who the 3 or 4 people are, and there's always one person that's like, I don't want to go to jail. And then they just start freaking naming names.
The snitch.
And then off you go.
I thought snitches get stitches.
Depends on where you're doing your time, I guess. But no, there's usually a co-defendant, and then the co-defendant rolls over on the other person.
How many drive-by shootings have you done in your life?
Have I done? 0.
No, how many of you represent it?
Probably half a dozen or so.
Oh
You don't get that. There's a lot of them around here, but your problem with drive-by shootings is, what do you think the problem with drive-by shooters is? Why they don't hire me?
Oh, they don't have any money.
They don't have any money. Right. 99% of the drive-by shooters get the public defender because they can't afford private attorney.
So you need your own show, dude. Like,
I have my own show.
No,
I've
like
told you
need
1,000 times.
no, you need like your
Like a
own
TV
show,
show?
like a TV show, like where it's like you
like a reality show, or
no,
like a,
it's like you talking about
like
something
LA
happened.
Long. Oh.
and then like there's actors.
Oh yeah, that would be cool.
That would be cool.
Could do some reenactments and stuff. Yeah.
Because I was thinking about like I was going to ask you about this case and that case, and I'm like, shit, like every case that I want to ask him about, like he represented.
Right. Like obviously, yeah. The problem, like I can't give names or specifics or whatever, because there's bar rules against that and stuff. But I could talk in generality. So yeah, the drive-by shootings are interesting. This is my first one where somebody actually died. I've had a lot of drive-by shootings. People got shot. People went away. Yeah, this is a murder case. So the person's looking at life. So it's about as serious as you can get. The rest of them I've had, this is the first person that's died. I've had people get hit. I've had a lot of people duck behind cars and get missed. I still get mostly road rage cases, because the traffic around here is brutal. And like every month I get somebody that pulls a gun on somebody, allegedly pulls a gun on somebody in a road rage incident. And then they always get the license plate number, and then they can identify the gun. It's always a pain in the ass.
You know, I thought about the other day. I thought about how like, so if you're a doctor and you cut the wrong foot off, right? So, the nurse marks the wrong foot, you chop it off. Nothing happens to the doctor's license. Like, the doctor will get sued by the person with the wrong foot cut off. They'll settle, and the doctor will go back to his life. If you mark the form wrong, or you give a gun away, like someone does a background check, and they're lawfully allowed to have it, but you give the gun away too soon, you lose your license.
Right.
And I know personally 3 different gun dealers who have lost their license because a clerical error caused them or their employees to let their gun go early. And they took the case, fought the ATF. ATF said no, upheld the revocation, and they lost their license. Mm-hmm. So that to me exemplifies how much of a serious thing the Second Amendment is, and how much the government wants to take away the rights of the people.
Right. So
but with that, where do you see anti-gun legislation going? Do you think it's just going to go dormant until the conservatives get out of power again, or do you think there's other, like, because I'm all about there's it's got to be nefarious forces, it's deep state bullshit, but you're like, nah, it's just fucking people who are lazy.
Right. Well, at the local level it is. At the ATF level, there's definitely some deep state stuff. What happened with the ATF is excuse me, as you know, way back in the day, the standard practice for a long time was you make a clerical error. The ATF just comes in, does the audits, finds a couple of clerical errors, say, look, stop making clerical errors. And they'll give you a verbal warning. Maybe they'll write something in. And that was basically it. They weren't in the business of revoking licenses. And then Joe Biden, a couple years ago, because he couldn't get any legislation passed, gave a directive to the ATF for a zero tolerance policy.
Zero tolerance.
So
which is still in effect.
Right, because it's still the Biden administration. So currently, the ATF mandate is basically zero tolerance. So you have one infraction, now they're going directly to revocation, whereas before they would do all the other steps. And it would usually require a lot of infractions back in the day. So now there's a zero tolerance policy, and that's what's happening is all these stores are getting their audits, and I've represented a couple of them when they call me. I've sat in on the audits and gone through all the paperwork. And then, yeah, they're just going straight for revocation these days. They're skipping all the other parts in the middle. So as far as legislation goes, I don't see in the immediate future any negative or positive gun legislation coming out of the Trump administration or the current federal legislature. Again, on the state level, there may be some positive stuff with the 18-year-olds, et cetera. But on the federal level with the Trump election, I don't see any positive or negative. Because look, Trump's not a gun guy either way. Like he's not in a hurry to take guns away, but he doesn't give two shits about giving you extra gun rights either. He's just not a gun guy. It's not something that's in his mindset. He's more worried about the economy, tariffs, and all that kind of stuff. But when he was in there for 4 years, we didn't get any pro-gun legislation. We actually got anti-gun legislation when he was in there, and some executive orders as well. So here's what I say about that. If nothing crazy happens, I don't think you're going to see any pro or negative legislation. If there's another weird mass shooting or some kind of crazy act like that, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that there isn't going to be another knee-jerk reaction on the federal level to do something about that, because I think Trump's instincts is to do what makes like the most people happy. And if he thinks that he can get more people happy by pushing something like a bump stock ban or whatever, then he'll do it. Pam Bondi is up to be the Attorney General, which would put her in charge of the ATF.
Yep.
Well, Pam Bondi was the Attorney General of the state of Florida when the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas Act was passed. She helped authored it with Governor, now Senator Rick Scott, and helped get it passed. And she's the one that defended it in all the lawsuits that Florida, Carey, and the NRA filed against that act when it first got passed. Pam Bondi was the one that went into court and was arguing that it should stay in effect. So I don't necessarily put it past them, because Trump just doesn't really care one way or the other. And Pam Bondi has a history of knee-jerk reaction to that shit, that if there's some weird thing that happens again, another crazy mass shooting or terrorist attack or whatever, that they might not do something weird as a knee-jerk reaction to sort of fix it. If nothing like that happens, I don't think you're going to see anything either way. I'm hoping that when Pam Bondi gets in there, she reverses the zero tolerance policy, and a lot of the ATF crap that came out, where the regulations on the SIG braces and everything else, that they kind of roll back a lot of those regulations. I'm not sure she's going to do it though, because I don't think she's going to get in there, and her job's not going to be to route out, anti-gun stuff at the ATF. It's going to be to route out, shit at the FBI and things of those nature. So I don't know what's going to happen. I don't think you'll see any legislation, but could you see some weird internal actions if some crazy event happens? I wouldn't put it past everybody.
We needed Matt Gaetz.
Well, I would have preferred him, because he would have gone in there and overturned all that shit. He's very pro Second Amendment. I agree. He would have been better anti-ATF stuff. I think Pam Bondi's a politician. She's a politician. So, you're looking at, I'm just glad Rick Scott didn't become the Senate president, because he was lobbying for that job, because then you would have had Rick Scott as the Senate president, the guy who passed the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas Act, Pam Bondi as the Attorney General, the one who wrote it and argued for it. And then you'd have Trump, who unfortunately has a history of knee-jerk reacting to gun stuff because he just doesn't have an affinity. He doesn't care one way or the other. So at least Rick Scott's not going to be in there. But the other two, I don't know. I worry about it.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about Pam Bondi.
Well, I just gave you my opinion, so
It's perfect.
yeah. No, I mean I don't like her as a pick. I mean, she's at least got conservative principles in the sense of she's not going to go with the deep state, and she's going to hopefully clear up the FBI. But she's certainly not going to be as aggressive about it as Matt Gaetz was, because I think she has greater political ambitions. Gaetz didn't care; he just wanted to go in there and throw bombs everywhere and fix it up. I think Pam Bondi has eyes on bigger things down the road, so she's going to be more political.
What about
We'll see.
What are you doing your competition shooting?
Whenever I can. I mean, we were supposed to have the local Glock match was going to happen back in October, and then one of the hurricanes came through and
Fucking hurricane.
and canceled it, and then basically ruined manatee gun and archery for a couple weeks while I had to clean up out there. So it's been reset now. I want to think for sometime in March. So we'll be doing one in March.
If
Me
you
and
had
McGowan,
to,
those guys.
if you had to defend the Luigi guy, what would you do?
I don't know how you could defend him, because the guy's an idiot. I mean, when I first saw that video, like everybody else, I was like, oh, this is a professional. It's like right out of a freaking mob movie or something. And then you find out that, he's taking his mask off to flirt with the guy behind the counter, and he's been getting caught on the videos. Yeah. And
It was a guy.
the girl behind the counter. Did I say guy behind the counter?
A guy, yeah.
So no, there was a hot girl behind the Starbucks counter. So he took his mask off to flirt with her. Boom. They get his face. That's how they catch him at McDonald's. He's still walking around with the gun and the suppressor in his pocket. Why didn't he chuck that shit in the East River when he was leaving? He marked things on there. He wrote a manifesto that they found in his pocket. So I don't know. The guy's not as smart as we thought, but I don't know how you could defend that guy, because he's on video doing it. He's got a manifesto in his pocket about why he did it. He's got the gun and the suppressor in his pocket when they catch him. So there's really no defense for that guy. What you're asking for there is just to try and get like maybe the lowest punishment you can get. I would get him evaluated. Like if I was his attorney, the first thing you do is get him mental health evaluated, because he might have some mental health problems. Because I mean, to do all that kind of stuff, you usually got to have some sort of mental health problem. So I don't think you're looking for not guilty there. I think you're looking for mitigation to try and get him, 50 years instead of life or something along those lines. They don't have the death penalty in New York, so it's not on the table.
Eyebrows don't match.
What?
Eyebrows don't match. That's
Yeah.
a defense.
Yeah.
Your Honor. Eyebrows don't match.
What do you think about that,
Big
Omar?
ass bushy eyebrows.
I don't know.
You think he shaved his eyebrow, or or do you think it's just like a misnomer on the camera?
I mean, my whole perspective on it, exactly what he was saying. Like, why would he hang on to the gun, the suppressor, and a manifesto? Like, you're sealing up all of the evidence and keeping it on your person. That I don't get. Going to a McDonald's, why was he bringing that to McDonald's?
I mean, hubris.
Maybe.
I've dealt with so many criminals that are stupid, so I don't know what to tell you. Yeah. I mean, most of my clients videotape themselves doing the crime or confessing to the crime, or they confess when they get caught. They leave their stuff on the thing. One case we had, a guy was hiding in the closet while the home invasion. Our client was one of the many co-defendants, as there always are, and everybody says he was in the closet during the shooting. And his defense was, no, I wasn't in that closet. I was doing a home invasion at a different place and it had a different flooring in the closet. That was his defense. Yeah, he lost a trial and got life in prison. So they're not smart. Like, if they were all smart, they wouldn't need lawyers. Like, I wouldn't have a job if all criminals were smart, because they'd all get away with it. So,
Do you ever have
don't ever subscribe to conspiracy that you can just subscribe to
people are stupid?
ignorance and stupidity.
Do you ever have moral objections to cases?
Well, I mean,
Like you get cases and you're like,
Sure.
fuck, no, I'm not doing that.
sure.
Like recently?
Yes, I guess it's kind of, here's what you do with the morally objective cases. Have you ever had something that you really don't want to sell, but somebody wants you to sell it? And what do you do in that situation?
I don't carry them.
Well, you throw out a price that you know they're not going to pay.
Oh. Yeah.
So that's kind of what, because you don't want to get a reputation for being like, I'm not going to take that case because I think you're a piece of crap, because then that word's going to get around and nobody's ever going to hire you as a lawyer. So the trick is, I probably shouldn't say this for everybody to watch, but the trick is, if you get a case that you really don't want, you just throw out a number.
Okay. So
And they don't pay it because they can't afford it. Or if they can afford it, then maybe your morals just kind of trickle down a little bit.
So if I want to carry micro Dracos, I should just mark them up to like $3,000 and put them on the wall.
That's what you do. And just be like, I'm not selling them. Nobody's bought one ever.
Can't do it. Chris will quit.
He hates micro Dracos.
Yeah.
He
No,
hates
it's just one of those. I mean, you can't. It's one of those things where if you had the luxury of being moral, you could do that. But you got mortgages to pay and kids to take care of or whatever. So you kind of sort things out. The issue is this. Again, I'm a constitutionalist. Whether you're a piece of crap or not, you have a right under the Constitution to competent legal representation, and you have the right to have the state prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. And so I may think you're a scumbag and I may think you're guilty, but you still have the right to have competent representation, and I'm going to give you that representation. And if the system works the way that it's supposed to work, whatever happens to you, but that's just, the way it goes. So I try not to make moral judgments on my clients. I mean, there's certain cases that I don't take because there's conflicts. I know them, or I know people who know them, or I just don't want to get involved in it. Lots of times it's sometimes you don't have the time for it. You can get a case that's so complicated. You're just like, it's going to take too many of my hours. I can't put into it, especially now that it's just me. Back in the day, obviously there was me and my wife. Now that's just me. I've had to kind of budget my time a little bit better for what I can take and what I can't take. So if I get a case that's just going to be real complicated, you just throw out a price and see what happens.
How old is your daughter? You have a daughter, right?
Yeah, I have two daughters. One of them's 21 and one of them's 12.
Is the 21-year-old going to go to law school?
No, I forbode it. No, I doubt it. I mean, she's currently at USF right now in her junior year, so she'll be making that decision pretty soon. But I don't think she has any desire to go.
Yeah, my buddy who's
law school.
who's an attorney who represented me when I was a bad guy back in the day. His son's now an attorney in his office.
Yeah, there's a lot of people. There's a lot of attorneys around that have their sons that work for them or whatever, and their daughters. But I mean, she can if she wants to, but she's never expressed any desire to do anything like that. And I wouldn't advise people to go to law school. Like I don't know.
So what about the pot thing? So the marijuana thing, the marijuana card thing,
right?
It's conflicting because it says it right there. If you have medical, if you're an addict, or if you are a user, or even lawfully by the government or unlawfully, you cannot purchase a firearm,
right?
And it goes back to, you have the inalienable right according to the Constitution. You should be able to. You can buy a firearm if you are an alcoholic. Mm-hmm. You can't buy a firearm if you come in drunk, but
sure.
And then people who smoke pot usually smoke pot all the time, or they just smell like they do. Not lately though.
They definitely smell like they do,
but not lately though. Where do you see that going in Florida?
So I think Florida is where it's at. I mean, obviously they just tried the constitutional amendment. It didn't get through to make it just recreational, and there's no desire in the legislature to make it recreational. To fix it for the firearm, there has to be a change at the federal level, because it's currently a Schedule I drug at the federal level. And as long as it's always a Schedule I drug at the federal level, you will never be able to pass a background check because you will be a prohibited person. It doesn't matter what the local state does. You can live in Colorado where it's completely legal, or in Florida where you can get a medical marijuana card, but the federal government still considers it to be a prohibited substance. And so if you're a user of that substance, you cannot purchase a firearm. So it's on the same list as cocaine and meth and everything else. The other ones, like Percocet and Oxycontin, right? You can get a prescription for Oxycontin and buy a gun all day long, but you can't get a prescription for marijuana. Of course, it doesn't make any sense, but welcome to the government. So those are on a different schedule, though. So that's why they're not on the list of prohibited stuff. So what you have to do is get the federal government to remove marijuana and put it in a different, lower schedule. Once that happens, that question will come completely off the form, and then you can smoke it recreational, have a marijuana card or whatever, and then you can still buy a gun. It becomes like alcohol, basically.
And that's never going to happen.
So
why is the federal government so hard about marijuana?
I just think it's a throwback to, it was originally put on that schedule back in the 60s.
Yeah.
It's the 60s, reefer madness and all that stuff that went around back then. And it's like every other law. Once it gets put in place, it takes an act of God, not Congress, basically, to have them repeal a law that they pass. Like, it's almost impossible. Yeah. There's also, again, I think you're going to find that there's a lot of law enforcement resistance to that. So I think a lot of the States won't pass those things because you get a lot of, I mean, the sheriffs were against this constitutional amendment. The Sheriff's Association were against this constitutional amendment. So I think you run into that at the federal level as well. I think it's like everything else. I think inevitably it will be at some point removed from that because the social conscience is just going that way. But nobody, everybody always says we should get rid of it. Every president's like, yeah, we should take it off, but it just never, it doesn't go anywhere. So until it goes somewhere at the federal level, if you use marijuana, whether you have a marijuana card or not, you cannot possess or buy a firearm.
You can't possess one either?
Correct, because you're a prohibited person. It's the same as having a convicted felon. Oh. If you are a user of illegal narcotics, convicted felon, domestic batterer, and it's on the list. So if you're using it, you'll fail the background check if you're honest about it, and you can't possess a firearm. You're a prohibited person.
Oh fuck! So if you have a marijuana card and you somehow get a gun through private sale, or you had it before you had your marijuana card, and you get in an altercation and use your gun, then it can be used against you.
No. What I mean by that is if you shoot somebody, they can't, in your criminal trial for shooting the person, say, oh, well, he shouldn't have had the gun in the first place. But you can get charged by the federal government with possession of a firearm by a prohibited person, just like a convicted felon.
And that's what happened to Hunter. Right?
Well, no, Hunter got charged because he lied on the form.
Okay.
But yeah, you can't and again, that is a federal charge. So there's no state crime of possession of a firearm while having a marijuana card. Okay. There's an intoxication one if you're using a firearm while you're intoxicated, and that could be any sort of drug. That's like DUI or whatever. But there's no statute that says possession of a firearm by a person who uses marijuana. It's convicted felon. It's a federal crime, though, because you're a prohibited person. So the feds would have to come in and charge you. Now, are the feds going around charging people with possession of a firearm when they got marijuana? No. It just becomes an additional charge that if they want to get you for something else, they add it on there. But you can, right? And that's the problem with the concealed carry permit, because there was always a discussion about, well, you can have a concealed carry permit and a medical marijuana card, and it's legal. That's true, because there's no cross-referencing. But you can't possess a firearm if you're using medical marijuana. So you can have a concealed firearm license if you want, but you can't carry a gun. So it's kind of pointless. And now that they've gotten rid of the requirement for a concealed carry permit, you still have to be eligible for a concealed carry permit to conceal carry without one. And you're not eligible one because you're a prohibited person. So you can't conceal carry either with one or without one. So basically, if you smoke marijuana, either legally or with a medical marijuana card, it is against the federal law for you to possess a firearm.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Yep. So choose wisely.
Choose wisely, children. Remember, stay off the pot.
Real quickly, have you ever done any of those expert reacts to X videos? I feel like it'd be perfect for
Sometimes we do a podcast every Thursday, me and Mike McGowan, who's he's an instructor or whatever. And sometimes when there's a famous one that comes out, like one that just goes viral or whatever, we'll play the clip on our weekly podcast, and I'll give my insight from a legal standpoint about what was correct, and he'll give his insight from a tactical standpoint of what was correct. So yeah, so we'll do those if a big one comes up. It's not like a huge basis of what my weekly videos are or my randomly videos on my channel. But when we do our YouTube podcast on Thursday nights, sometimes we'll do that depending on what's in the news.
You should do that outside of the podcast. I feel like that would hit off. People eat that shit up. You just, gun lawyer reacts to fucking John Wick, and you just watch and you're like, yeah, that's illegal.
Yeah. I've always threatened to do a movie or TV one because everything on there annoys the shit out of me.
You should do that.
Nobody has a round in the chamber. They're always cocking their shotgun over and over again. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll do it. Like next time we have you on, if you'll come back on and bless us with your appearance.
Come on anytime you want.
Well,
I've always wanted to do that because every time I'm watching TV, that's what happens. They walk into the room, they're pointing a gun everywhere, and they see somebody, and then they cock it. I'm like, so you just walked into the room with an empty round in your chamber? Like, I don't understand that. Or the grips are always funny on some of these shows, and then the legal stuff is always funny too, right? Yeah, it's like you can't You can't do that. It doesn't work that way.
So you don't walk around with the perpetual Law and Order theme song in your hand?
Yes,
Dun,
it's
dun,
crazy.
dun,
That's
dun.
why I don't watch legal shows. Like, I can't watch legal shows because that's all I do all day is legal. I don't want to come home and relax and watch like a legal drama or whatever. It drives me nuts. And they're always wrong. Everything about them is wrong. So I can't watch them. It drives me nuts.
Yeah, if you just take like a 10-minute clip and then just point out everything that's wrong, people will eat that shit up.
Yeah. I've often thought about doing that. Problem is, I'm not technically savvy to like know how to cut those up and then put them in my OBS screen and do all that back and forth. So I'm still kind of figuring all that.
And you know what?
Well, we'll
OBS
do
is?
it.
That's
Yeah, it's not easy to do.
Yeah, we'll do it. Eric,
Sure, I can figure it out. But yeah, if you guys want to do it one night, that'd be hilarious. Get a bunch of clips together, put a little thing, and we'll watch it and critique them. I'll come on here for whatever you want me to come on here for.
It's a great idea. Well, man, we really appreciate you coming back on.
Of course. Like I said, anytime you want me on here, I'll be on here.
So we're going to call it. We want to thank Jeff Young, the attorney here. You can find him at ManasotaGunLawyer.com. You can look up Manasota Gun Lawyer on YouTube and check him out.
It's musings with MGL, because if I put Manasota Gun Lawyer on there, the algorithm screws with your channel. So it's literally called musings, meaning, I'm sitting around thinking about what's going on in the world, with MGL, short for Manasota Gun Lawyer. So you can find that on there. Yeah, I have lots of videos on there. Please like, subscribe, share, get my numbers up.
And if there's anything you can take away from the podcast, if you ever get denied the ability to buy a firearm and you think that you've been wrongly put into a pile with a bunch of other people who can't own firearms, Jeff can probably help you. So look him up, and thank you for coming by.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Anytime you want. Happy holidays. Merry Christmas.
Don't leave me hanging.
Oh, see you over there. There you go.
Thank you, buddy.
All right, yeah.
We'll see you.
Peace.